Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for January the 29th. Today we are reading together the 13th Psalm. Psalm number 13 is the subtitle for it is A Plea for Deliverance. What is supplied for us within the text of the Psalm is for the choir director, a Psalm of David. For the choir director, a Psalm of David, one of the 73, I believe, Psalms that we have attributed to David. And some of them give us very specific details about when the psalm was written, the context of the psalm. We just don't have that here. We do not know the exact situation that this psalm is describing. Maybe this was more general in nature. Maybe David felt the way that he feels within the psalm a number of times, and this is something that recollects a number of different instances, and is a psalm that could be applied to different situations that David found himself within. But this is, I believe, a psalm of lament, and is often the case with a psalm of lament. It morphs into a psalm of confidence, confidence in Yahweh in the face of the difficulty that David is facing. So let's read the psalm here together today on this Monday. Again, we're reading Psalm number 13, A Plea for Deliverance. Psalm 13, verse number 1, How long, Yahweh, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I store up anxious concerns within me? Agony in my mind every day. How long will my enemy dominate me? Consider me and answer, Yahweh, my God. Restore brightness to my eyes. Otherwise, I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have triumphed over him, and my foes will rejoice because I am shaken. I have trusted in your faithful love. My heart will rejoice in your deliverance. I will sing to Yahweh because he has treated me generously. And that is the reading of Psalm number 13, a short psalm, only 6 verses, but it does break down very nicely into 3 sections of 2 verses each. Verses 1 and 2 seem to be the complaint that David is offering up to Yahweh. Verses 3 and 4 constitute the prayer that David offers up to Yahweh. The complaint in verses 1 and 2 just kind of giving his feelings and his emotions during this situation. Verses 3 and 4 give the prayer. This is given the emotions and the feelings of the situation. This is then how he communicates to Yahweh. And then verses 5 and 6 constitute prayer, or praise. There's praise that David gives to Yahweh because he knows that Yahweh will be with him and will bless him in this situation. Even though initially we're going to see he doesn't exactly feel that way, by the end of the psalm, we'll see the reality of the situation from the perspective of David. So verses 1 and 2, the complaints, we see a question asked 4 different times, and the question is, how long? How long? This is a question that is asked a number of times within the Psalms, but within Psalm 13, we see the most number of times the question of how long is asked. Within verses 1 and 2, or excuse me, within verse 1, the 2 questions are how long, or the questions are, how long, Yahweh, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide from me? Will you hide your face from me? That has caused some people to question whether or not what David is facing here in this moment is some sort of punishment as a result of sin. There is not a mention of sin here. There's not a mention of any sort of repentance on David's part. So that's only speculative that this is a result of some sort of sin. But the reality is that David feels forgotten by God, that there is a lack of practical help that God is offering to him. There's a lack of friendship. How long will you hide your face from me? Sense of abandonment, it seems, that David feels here in this situation as well. For Yahweh to hide his face from David is the opposite of what we see, for instance, in Psalm number 4 and verse number 6, where it says, many are asking, who can show us anything good? And then David says, let the light of your face shine on us, Yahweh. Let the light of your face shine on us, And whenever you think about God's face shining on someone, that often brings up the thought of Numbers 6:24 through 26, which is the Aaronic blessing for the people. So for Yahweh to hide his face from David, again, a sense of abandonment. What we see here um, is David seemingly believing in Yahweh's sovereignty as well. He's going to Yahweh because he believes that Yahweh has power in this situation, and he feels as if God is not using that power to benefit him here in the moment. So there's a theological issue, which is separation from God, at least feelings of abandonment from God. Verse number 2, the first half of verse number 2 talks about how long will I store up anxious concerns within me? Anxious concerns within me. David is oppressed within himself um, with restlessness, with unease, with a lack of peace and joy here in this moment because of the situation that he is facing. If he does not have God, if God has forgotten him, if God has hid his face from him, then David can only feel, within his mind, it seems, he can only feel agony and anxiety at this point. If there is no God, there can only be anxiety and agony. But then thirdly, there is the question of how long will my enemy dominate me? David seems condemned by an enemy in some way. And again, we don't have details about this situation, what specific situation in David's life this is attributed to. So the enemy here is of unknown origins. It could be the personification of just some sort of struggle that David is dealing with. But whatever the case may be, David feels condemned by his enemies. He feels dominated by them. So, in response to these feelings that David is experiencing, feelings of abandonment, feelings of oppression, feelings of condemnation, what does David do? Well, David turns to God. He's already spoken to God in a sense, but now he really directs his message and his heart toward God because, again, his confidence is that God can fix this. So consider me, look at me. He cries out to God, answer Yahweh, my God. Again, David feels able to, even though here in the moment he might feel abandonment from God in some sense, he still knows that covenant relationship exists there between him and his God. So he feels as if he can cry out to God, look at me, consider me, answer me. And his request is that Yahweh would restore brightness to my eyes, that vitality would return to David, that joy would return to David, that David's life would be renewed, because otherwise I will sleep in death. Otherwise, there is only grief, there's only sadness, there's only hopelessness for me. And that's going to result then in his defeat. It's going to result in his enemies being able to say, I've triumphed over him, and my foes will rejoice because I am shaken, because I am defeated, because I am hopeless. And David knows that if his enemies feel as if they triumphed over David, then that is almost as if they've triumphed over God, because God is David's king. God is David's king, his special king, his anointed king, the king with whom he's made a tremendous covenant that his throne would be established forever. Imagine the gloating that an enemy of David would have if David truly were to be defeated. So here's the issue, the situation, the problem. I feel abandoned, Yahweh. I feel oppressed. I feel condemned, but I turn to you and I ask that you restore brightness to my eyes. Give me vitality, give me strength, give me renewal. Because if you don't, then the enemy is going to be able to gloat, and they're going to be able to think that they've actually accomplished something. But then David turns to praise again. So often within these Psalms of lament, the lament turns into praising. Think about the song, God is the one who can turn mourning into dancing. And that's often what we see with these Psalms is they begin with lament and then they climb up into a place of praise and victory. And I really like what one person said about this Psalm. He described this Psalm as a climb up from the pit of despair to the mountaintop of trust and faith. That this really is, even though the psalm is written in the way we write from top to bottom, it really should be turned on its head. That we should read verse number 1 as if that being in the very pits of despair. And yet, bit by bit, as we move up in these verses, we start climbing up from the pit of despair and end up on the mountaintop of trust and faith. For verse number 5, I have trusted in your faithful love. I have trusted in your hesed. Again, that important word which speaks to the gracious loving kindness of Yahweh. It is the very definition of who God is, of his character. I've trusted in your faithful love, and my heart will rejoice in your deliverance. I will sing to Yahweh because he has treated me generously. He has granted all of my desires. Remember, what was the request? To consider me, to listen to me, to answer me, to restore. And David has confidence that that is exactly what God will do. That because of David's trust, because of his confidence in Yahweh, he would be able then to rejoice and to sing in the way that God is blessing him, in the way that God lifts him up from the pit of despair and places him high atop the mountain of trust and faith. Now, when with this psalm, one particular resource I was reading talked about how, this psalm might not always resonate with us. We might not be in a season of life where we feel as if we have been forgotten by God, or if God is hiding his face from us. We might not feel abandoned or oppressed or condemned. But somebody is. Somebody out there is. And we can pray for them. We can pray that they might find their way out of the pit of despair and find their way by God's grace up onto the mountain of trust and faith once again. But there'll be other times whenever we do feel like we're in this situation, where we do feel as if wicked influences have a greater hold on us and have had a greater impact on us than the loving kindness of God's gracious face. We might feel that, and at that point, this psalm might really resonate with us all the more. But regardless of if it's us or if it's others, we can pray just as David does here, just as he goes from his complaint of the situation to his prayer and then ending up in praise. We too can either pray for others as they go through this kind of situation within their own lives, or we can pray for ourselves when we find ourselves going through this situation. So someone somewhere is feeling like this, and even if we're not right now, one day we probably will. So may Psalm 13 be a wonderful blessing to us whenever we do find ourselves in the pit of despair. If you have any questions or comments about Psalm 13, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time reading along with me today on this Monday morning. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday. And we look forward to reading with everybody again on Wednesday as we read together on the last day of January 31st in Psalm 14. Before we get there, though, tomorrow on the 30th, January 30th, is Jeff Clark's birthday. Jeff, hope you have a great birthday. May God bless you, and thank you for being the part that you are to our church family. Again, everybody have a great rest of your Monday. We'll see you on Wednesday. Take care, and God bless.